She ran with the storm in her hair, and ash in her lungs, the moon a torn coin above the black pines. Lysandra Vale did not belong on the forest floor. Omega-born, she had been taught to move softly along marble and shadow, to leave no trace except the scent of winter roses that marked the vampire king's consort. Tonight her gown was ripped and wet, her bare feet cut by needles and shale, the roses drowned beneath the copper tang of fear. Behind her, somewhere beyond the tree line and the river, the citadel bells had begun tolling the old alarm that meant a bond had been defied. A mate had run. She did not look back. She did not say his name. She had loved Callias once, or thought she had, when the court taught her that love meant obedience and a still face. She had been chosen at 16, marked by the king with a vow that turned to gold on her wrist and glass in her throat. The first year had been fine silk and candlelight, and low, careful laughter. The second was cold. By the third, she had learned how a voice could bruise without touching skin, and how an immortal could make time a weapon. On the fourth, she began to dream of a boy who had chased fireflies with her on the edges of her mother's lands, a wolf pup who smelled of smoke and rain, and swore he would come back for her even if the sky fell. She had not spoken his name in years, not even to herself. She spoke it now, a panting prayer into the needles. Rovan. The river answered first. It slid in silver through a gulch cut by old floods, louder with the storm, cold enough to steal her breath when she waded in. She crossed anyway, the skirt a dragging weight, the king's gold bracelet clacking against stone, as if it wanted the forest to hear. She reached the far bank, and bit it off her wrist with her own teeth, tasted metal and old vows, and threw it into the black. The wind took the sound away. The forest changed at the boundary. Pines gave to firs and firs, to great-bellied oaks strung with lichen.
Here the scent shifted.
Wet soil, crushed mint, the clean musk that meant wolves. Not the ragged loners who haunted the downs, but a pack scent, layered, ordered, warm. A howl lifted and fell, not hunting, warning. She stepped from the trees into a clearing where an old mill crouched under ivy, lamps burned behind its high windows. Two men stood at the door with the kind of stillness that came from training and blood. They were not human. They were not vampire. She reached for the words she had prepared and lost them to the shake in her hands. "I need Alpha Rovan," she managed. One guard's head cocked. His gaze fell to the bare skin on her wrist, where the king's mark should have glowed. He smelled the truth that clung to her like the river. Fear, exhaustion, and something else beneath. The old pack-salt memory of summers, spent on the Vale border with a boy who shared bread with her on a broken wall, and said he would always choose her. "Name," the guard said softly. "Lysandra." The name landed between them and changed the air. The younger guard's eyes flicked, then widened with recognition. Not of the consort the court taught the world to know, but of the pup, from 100 pack tales the old ones still told. The moon broke free of a cloud, and washed the clearing in dull silver. He touched his wrist to a plate at the door. "Alpha," he said into the dark. "It's her." The door opened as if the mill had exhaled. Lamps made a corridor of copper and shadows, smelling of tallow and rain-damp wool, and the faint medicinal sting of wild thyme. They led her up a stair whose treads remembered 1,000 boots, to a hall where maps hung heavy with pins and cord. He stood with his back to her, broad shoulders in a dark shirt, hair damp from the same storm that had glazed her lashes. Even his stillness was familiar, the coiled restraint of a boy who had learned to hold until it was time to strike or time to offer a hand. He turned. There was no court mask to meet. Rovan Theron did not wear faces for anyone. He stopped halfway to her and looked, not at the torn gown or the wet hair or the bare blue hands, but at her eyes. He flinched, once, so slight she would have missed it if she had not been the one he had learned to lie to at 12. "You ran," he said, voice low and rough like a road through stone. "I did," she whispered, "from him." His jaw worked. He did not ask which him. "Are you bleeding?" "Not the kind that shows." The answer made his broad chest lift and hold. He reached, as if to touch her face, and closed his hand, before it bridged the last inch. "Sit," he said, and the word was not an order so much as a promise that someone knew what to do. He draped a wool coat across her shoulders, heavy and warm, smelling like campfire and pine pitch and a sweetness she had always thought only belonged to humans. Bread still warm from an oven. Maria at court had once smuggled her a heel of bread from the kitchens. She had cried eating it. Rovan crouched on the edge of the table, not his throne and not his war chair. He had chosen the table where they worked. "Tell me," he said. "The king will say this is treason," she managed. "He'll say I've been taken or bewitched. The king will say what keeps him powerful." His mouth almost smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "What do you say?" She found the words she had been repeating to herself since she smashed the clasp on her cloak and ran. "I say the bond is a chain when one uses it as one. I say a vow that crushes a throat is a lie wearing holy clothes. And I say we'll not let him drag you back." The simple we cracked something inside her. She had thought she would come and beg and be refused. She had thought he would send her to the human quarter, with a sack of coin and an apology. She had not expected the steadiness, or that her body would believe it before her mind did. "Rovan," she said. It came out like a child says water. His eyes softened, and then hardened again as his gaze slid to her throat. She understood. Vampires masked their damage in winter-cool skin, but wolves could smell bruises, even when the body hid them. He saw what had been done with words, and waiting. "He doesn't always strike," she said, because the truth wanted a witness. "Sometimes it's only silence. Sometimes it's nothing at all for a week, a month. As if I'm furniture he has walked around. When he looks again, it's worse." Rovan's hands lay flat on his knees, veins standing. The old scar across his knuckles had been from the summer she fell out of the willow, and he caught her badly, and both of them pretended it had been her fault to keep his father from taking the belt to him. "I remember you climbing," he said softly. "You were fearless where I was careful. I was small enough to fit between branches," she said. "You weren't. You're not." "No," he agreed, "not anymore." The guards outside shifted. A soft sound of weight and duty. Rovan's gaze flicked to the door and back. He was calculating. Risk, time, blood. He was also angry in a way that did not spill or break things. It was the kind of anger that built ships and laws and last stands. "You know what this is?" he said after a quiet that felt like the moment before a bell. "War," she said. It did not sound like thunder. It sounded like the word for winter, when you had already stocked the woodpile and counted the jars in the cellar. "He holds the covenant," Rovan said. "On paper, and in the minds of 1,000 frightened councils, they will say no werewolf touches a vampire's bound mate." "I am not bound," she answered, and her voice did not shake. "I tore the gold. I threw it into the river." "He'll say river water cannot wash away a king's mark." She lifted her wrist. The skin bore a faint crescent where the cuff had rested for years, paler than the rest of her. "Then I will," she said, and looked at him until he understood that she meant it the old way, the pack way, where choice was not a ceremony, but a standing. He sat back as if something heavy had changed hands. The door thumped. A second later, it opened and Tavi, the younger guard, slid in without apology. "Spears at the lower path," he said. 3 sigil bearers and a carriage under shield. Court colors. Rovan rose. The room seemed too small for him. "How long?" "Minutes," Tavi said. "They knew where to find her." "He always found me," Lysandra said to the map, very calm, as if she were remarking on weather. "It's the bond. It points not only the one who flees, but the one who claims." Rovan's mouth became a line. "We break it." "That's not allowed," said a grizzled voice from the doorway, and a broad-shouldered man stepped in with rain in his beard. Kale, Rovan's second, had a way of entering rooms like bad news wrapped in good sense. He took in Lysandra, the empty wrist, the wet gown, and he did not ask questions anyone could hear. "Alpha, the council is on the stairs," he said. "They woke to bells and want to be told we're not insane." "They'll be told," Rovan said. "After." Kale's gaze slid to Lysandra again, and something like pity, but grimmer showed there. "My lady," he said, which in wolf tongue meant I recognize you as someone with history here, and not only trouble. "They'll have paper," Lysandra murmured. "And a language that calls me unwell, or enchanted." "They'll have pikes," Kale said, "and won't show them until someone bleeds. Then let them show them to me." Rovan took her chin in 2 fingers, careful as if she were glass. He did not ask permission to look, he gave her the chance to refuse. She did not. "You are not standing in front of a spear for us when you just climbed out of a river," he said. "You are not a banner." "I am not a banner," she agreed. "But I am not something to hide on a shelf either." The flash of a smile, real this time, even here. "You always argued like you were taller, Lys. And you always listened like you were kinder," she said, and the air between them shifted, a thread caught and pulled taut across years. Footsteps hit the stair in quick, even beats. The walls remembered old floods and older feasts, and did not care what kind of council crowded their corridors now, the room filled with wolves in shirts and belts and damp hair. Rovan lifted a hand, and the growl under their talk quieted to a hum. He did not sit. He did not climb to the high chair. He stood with his pack at his back, and the vampire girl at his side, and turned to meet the men in red lacquer armor, who arrived on a breath like grave snow. They were beautiful, as all Callias's emissaries were raised to be. Their faces were white as the underside of a moth's wing, their eyes, like stones caught in river ice. The one in front did not look at Rovan first. He looked at Lysandra with a kind of sorrow that was a performance, and would have fooled anyone who had not learned the court. "My lady," he breathed, voice pitched for witnesses. "How they have frightened you. Come, the king is beside himself with worry." Lysandra's mouth closed on a sound that was not laughter. Rovan stepped forward without sound the way he had done as a boy stalking through fern and shadow. "She came to us under guest right," he said. "She leaves if and when she chooses." The emissary's gaze slid to him as one indulges a petitioner. "Alpha," he said, and managed to make the word a lesser title. "No wolf custom overrides the covenant. The king's mate belongs to him." "She belongs to herself," Rovan said, and the air prickled. Kale's hand twitched once at his hip and settled. "You forget your place," the emissary said gently. "And your rank. You forget what happens when dogs think themselves equal at the table." There was a ripple in the room, not growl and not breath, the collective reflex of a dozen men who had bled beside one another in winters that had no name. Rovan lifted a palm and the sound died because that was what he could ask, and they would give it until he did not deserve it. He pointed at Lysandra's bare wrist. "Your king bound her with gold," he said. "She chose to break it. The river took it. You want to say the river's law means nothing? Say it loud enough for every god to hear." The emissary's beautiful mouth thinned. "This is not a question of rivers." "Everything is," Rovan said. "Where do you think your covenants were written first, if not on banks in mud with reeds?" Tavi leaned to Kale and whispered something that smelled like humor, and the corner of Kale's stern mouth moved. The emissary took a step. Rovan took a step. They were close enough now Lysandra could see the scene where the vampire's perfect mask met what might be a face beneath. "If you keep her," the emissary said, voice still soft, "the king will bring the night down. He will freeze your crops in summer, break your roads, turn your wells to mirrors. He will call old things from under the mountain. He will unname your children." "Then, he's already lost," Rovan said, as if reciting weather. "A king who has to magic a village to ash to keep one woman means less than ash." The emissary blinked. That, perhaps, was not in the script. He shifted ground. "You would doom your pack." "I would choose her," Rovan said, and the words startled even him because he had not known he would speak them aloud when the room smelled of rain and iron. "I would choose her as I chose at 8 with a scraped knee, and at 12 with a stolen loaf, and at 16 when I should have found her and did not. I would choose her not because she is vampire or because she is hunted, but because she is Lysandra, and I remember who I am when I stand near her, and I will not return her to anyone who would rather own than love." Silence took the hall as if a bell had struck. Wolves looked at their alpha, then at the girl, then at the emissaries, and the dark stairs below. Something older than law shifted its weight. The emissary's gaze flickered to the open window where stormlight went thin. He lifted one gloved hand. The men behind him reached into their lacquered coats and brought out parchment, heavy with seals and daggers, slender as needles. "By decree," the emissary said, "Lysandra of House Vale is remanded to the court for her own protection. Any who obstruct will be taken and tried as oathbreakers." He didn't finish. The first spear struck the doorframe a hand's width from his ear. It thrummed with impact, bright with wolf marks cut into the ash. The guards on the threshold had not thrown it. The spear had come from outside, from the rain, from a hand on the stair that had moved like a shadow given teeth. "No," said a voice from the landing in a tone that did not rise or strain, and the room learned a new quiet. An old woman stood there in a shawl, woven with river grasses and bits of glass. Hair, a long grey braid. Eyes green as the moss in the mill race. The smell that came with her was not wolf, and not vampire but water, and the iron taste of vows that predated both. "I watched you write the first version of that paper," she told the emissary mildly. "You were different then, less lovely, more afraid." He stared at her with calculation flickering over shock. "Hearthwitch," he said, as if naming a species on a hunt. She came down the stairs. Not fast, not slow. Lysandra felt Rovan relax and tense at once. The way you did before a fight you might win, because someone who remembered your name had entered. The old woman looked at Lysandra and smiled without pity. "Child," she said, "come away from the edge of him." Lysandra realized she had been standing half a step in front of Rovan. Instinct old as any pack. She stepped back until their shoulders nearly touched. The witch flicked the parchment with a knuckle. "River law," she said, "outranks court law when the thing in question is a chain thrown into it." "You cannot break a mate bond with theatrics," the emissary said. "No," the witch said, "but you can end a contract with consent." She cocked her head at Lysandra. "Do you consent to be free?" The room inhaled. Lysandra closed her eyes and saw a willow, a boy's muddy hands, the river at night carrying away long grass and little boats made of bark. She opened them. "I do," she said. The words seemed to sink into the old wood, into the wet stone of the wall, into the meat of Rovan's shoulder. The witch's smile turned bright and terrible. "Heard and witnessed." She snapped her fingers once. Nothing moved, and then everything did. The lamps guttered, the rain rose. A sound like distant bells unstitched the edge of the air. The emissary put a hand to his throat, as if something delicate had tugged there and broken. He looked suddenly smaller without the assumed gravity. He bared his teeth. "The king is welcome to come down from his well-dressed mountain," the witch said, "and make his case to the river that forgot how to fear him." She tipped her head at Rovan. "Alpha Wolf, if you mean to keep her, mean it with both hands." He did not look away from Lysandra. "I do," he said, and did not know until the witch nodded that he had just married himself to a war nothing in him regretted. The emissary's men drew their needles. The wolves lifted their chins and showed teeth that had carved winter. Outside, thunder rolled like a door sliding in its long stone track. Rovan leaned to Lysandra and spoke as if they were alone. "I cannot promise you the easy road," he said. "Only that I'll walk it with you." She could not promise him safety. Only that the sight of him beside her made the world stop spinning long enough to be chosen on purpose. "Then walk," she said, and when the emissary lunged and the first needle knife cut the lamplight into ribbons, she stepped forward, not as a banner, and not as something kept, but as a girl who had once climbed a willow and yelled down for the boy to follow, and he had, and he was. The first cut never drew blood. It cut the air. Steel flashed, lacquer split, and the emissary's needled blade carved a line where Rovan's throat had been a heartbeat ago. He had moved without thinking, drawing Lysandra behind his shoulder, the way a boy moves when a branch falls, and he knows where the shadow will land, because he has lived under that tree all his life. Kale crashed into the nearest vampire like a door taken off its hinges. Tavi's second spear flew, and found a joint in lacquer, with a clean, ugly sound. Wolves did not roar when they fought well. They breathed. The room filled with breathing and the chime of steel and the hiss vampires make, when they understand they are not the only hunters in the dark. Lysandra did not freeze. She had for 5 years learned to turn herself to glass when pain came near. Tonight she broke that training. The emissary pivoted toward her, eyes bright with the satisfaction of a man completing a chore he had rehearsed. She reached for the old shelf where, when she had been a child in this mill, there had been a jar of nails and a tin of river hooks. Her hand closed not on rust and wire but on a length of chain looped for hauling sacks. She swung it without grace, and with every ounce of anger she had saved like coins in a cracked jar. It caught his wrist with a sound like a bell rung wrong. His needle dropped and clattered across the table. Rovan's hand found the emissary's throat, not closing, holding. There was a difference. He turned the vampire's face to the hearthwitch. "He walks out if you say," he told her, voice steady and hard, "or he stays in our ground under our law." The witch's eyes were river green without mercy. "He came with paper and knives," she said. "He knew where he was. He stays." The emissary stilled, as if someone had poured wax into his joints. The other two faltered when the tide went out of their leader. Cale drove one backward through the mapboard so their polished armor cracked the corded lines that ran from mill to hilltop to river. Tavi pinned the other to the long table with his palm and a blade of wood planed to a killing edge. "Bind them," Rovan said, and the word was not shouted. It did not need to be. The pack obeyed. Only when it was done did the room remember to breathe. The rain outside softened, then strengthened again, as if the storm were adjusting its grip. Lysandra was shaking, but not with fear. Not only. Rovan looked at the chain in her hands, and something like admiration, raw as new skin, lit his face. "You never did swing a thing halfway," he said. "I never learned halfway," she said, and when their eyes met all the years between now and a broken willow branch collapsed to a single, clean bridge. "Alpha," Cale said, breath still coming in measured pulls. "This is the first knock. The next won't ask politely." "The next will be the king," Tavi muttered, "or his mirror. He won't set foot where water can speak." "The next will be the council," Cale said. "Ours. They won't like what the river just heard." They came in pieces. Elders with rain in their eyebrows and worry in their mouths. Young ones smelling of iron, and wanting to throw their bodies at a problem they could not name. Mothers with shawls tight and eyes sharp. A boy with a sling still on his arm from a hunt gone wrong, who had no business on this floor and came anyway. Rovan did not send them away, because secrets were for courts, not for packs that meant to survive winter. He did send the bound emissaries downstairs to the mill's cool storeroom with 4 guards, and the witch's words stitched into the doorway. Only then did he climb onto the table and stand there, not taller, not grander, but visible to anyone who wanted to know where to look when the room rocked. "You know why the bells rang," he said. "You smell the choice she made and I made and the river made. The court will come, we'll meet them with our law and our bodies." Elder Verin, whose voice had been kind to Rovan when his father's had not, spoke first, because Rovan had let his eyes rest on him long enough to mean please. "What is the plan that keeps live mouths fed while the Covenant hammers our doors?" he asked. "What is the plan that stops their gold from buying our winter wheat out from under us? Choosing isn't a plan. It's the first step toward needing one." Rovan nodded. "No offense taken, because none had been given. We break what they use to call this treason," he said. "We break the lie that he owns her. We already cut the gold," the witch witnessed. "But that's pack and river law. We take it to the stones before they can sell a prettier story." A ripple passed through the room at the word stones, the old moot place where granite kept the memory of every oath. Even wolves who laughed at rights did not laugh at the stones. "You want a tribunal," someone said. "They'll fill it with court tongues and men who like the way wine tastes in their own mouths." "Not if the witch calls it," Cale said, glancing at her. "Not if we pull the old string hard enough. It rings in the conclave, and they can't pretend they didn't hear." The hearthwitch splayed her fingers over the table as if testing the grain. "You boys talk like mountains are easy to move," she said dryly. "But you're not wrong. The stones listen when river and pack speak together. It will bring him out of his mirrors whether he wants mud on his shoes or not. And if he doesn't come," Tavi said, "he sends the mirror instead." The mirror was not a thing. It was a show the court had perfected over centuries. Polished obsidian, smoke, and light, a way of bending seeing, so that a king could stand inside other men's halls without ever getting his hem dirty. Mirrors carried more than faces. They carried stories, the kind that stuck like burrs in the fur of memory. The court would flood the settlement with its version by dawn, if they had not already started. Lysandra felt the old ache in her chest return, not as panic this time but as preparation. "He'll make the river lie," she said, with images. "He'll tell the mothers their pups will sicken in their sleep if a wolf lets a vampire girl choose her own life. He'll name me unwell and unsound. He'll sell my breaking as proof." Cale looked at her, not like a relic, not like a problem. "What breaks that?" he asked simply. "My words," she said, and surprised herself by not flinching. And my record. I wrote because he taught me to doubt my own remembering. There are pages in the veil house, under the floor where the willow's shade used to touch. There are notes in the hem of the dress they made me wear to the winter ball. There are receipts from the human apothecary, with names I had to borrow with tears in my mouth. I kept them, not because I meant to fight a king, but because I needed to know when I was not going mad. Rovan's breath left him with a sound like approval and grief intertwined. We get them, he said. You can't, Tavi blurted. His wards. His wards know vampire sign and court hand, the witch said with amusement sharp as nettle. They do not know what wolves teach at 5 to keep foxes out of henhouses. We'll go at dusk under rain and talk to the house in the old tongue so it thinks we're mice. And if the house thinks you're thieves? Elder Verin asked, a line at the corner of his mouth that might have been trying not to smile. Then it will scold us, and let us take what was always hers, the witch said, because no house stands long when it forgets the girls who learned to walk in its shadow. The plan set like bread proving. Simple ingredients, warmth enough to make them rise. They would split, Kale with a handful to the veil house for the journals, Tavi to the stones to wake them with the witch, Rovan to speak with the elders who were not in this room because someone had to put coin and grain where mouths would be when the court tried to starve them quiet. Lysandra would not be hidden. She would walk the settlement at noon with her hood off. The mothers would see her eyes, and the butcher would see her buy a heel of rye with her own pocket coin, and the baker's little boy would trip, and she would catch him, and when the mirror came, it would find a girl who had become a person again in front of 100 witnesses with turnip dirt under their nails. Sleep a little, Rovan told her finally, when the room's heat had turned from fight to work. Eat something that's not fear. He led her not to a chamber shut away and gilded but to a corner room with a window that refused to be anything but itself. The bed was narrow and clean, the quilt smelled of sun and nettle soap. He set a bowl of stew on the table, tore bread with his hands, and salted it with his fingers, the small pack way that blessed food with human, not God, care. You'll make them angrier, she said between 2 bites that made her want to cry because they were so simple a mercy. Probably, he said. He had never lied to her when they were small. It turned out he had not learned to since. But anger burns hot and brief. Shame lasts. We'll make them feel the right one. You'll stand in front of old stones and say, I choose her, where everyone can hear. He looked at his hands, and then at her, as if surprised they were attached. I'll say it, until my mouth remembers how to be truthful all the time, he said lightly. His mouth wanted to smile. His eyes did not. Lys, he added, quieter. You can still go if you want. The witch can take you past the hedges and into human lands, and find you a house with white walls and a gate that sticks, and no one's law but seasons. No one will call you back. Not me. And if I go? She asked, because questions were a way to touch without hands. I'll stand in front of the court anyway, he said. And tell them river and pack outrank them. The world can be better even if I don't get to keep the part of it that smells like you. His throat worked. He seemed to want to laugh at himself and did not. And then I'll plant more turnips, I suppose. She put the bread down because her hand had started to shake. I would like the gate that sticks, she said, and a house that is mine, and a window that is not a mirror for a man who needs to see himself bigger. I would like to paint the fence a color you say is terrible, and watch you pretend not to mind. I would like to mend your shirts badly. I would like to wake with flour under my nails because I tried to make bread like your grandmother and burned it and you ate it anyway. I am not asking you to choose between that and your pack. She drew a breath that did not hurt as much as it used to. I am telling you what I will choose if I get to. He did not touch her face. He looked at it like a map, and like the view from a hill you climbed because you heard as a child it would let you see all the way to the sea. Then we build the world in which you can, he said. The world did not intend to be helpful. By morning, the court's mirrors bloomed on the far side of the river, like night flowers made of glass. They lined the road where the mill's shadow fell, tall as doors, black as water under stars. In them, Callias's face appeared, perfect as the stories, eyes heavy-lidded with regal concern. Lysandra, the king murmured, and people who did not mean to listen found themselves doing it. My poor frightened love, come home. They do not understand what you are. They will wear you like a banner, until rain turns you to paper. Come home, to to where vows keep you safe, and winter cannot touch the windows. The mirrors carried more than words. They carried scenes. Lysandra sobbing in a gold room, Lysandra throwing a glass at a stone hearth, Lysandra at a door she could not open, with her palms bloody from pounding. The settled women drew their shawls closer. The men shifted, as if bracing against a rain that found the seams in coats. A boy whispered, "She's mad," before his mother pulled his ear. Lysandra stood in the millyard, with the noon light sharp and honest, watching her worst moments stitched into lies. She felt the old spinning begin, the one that made the edges of the world curl. Someone's hand brushed hers without enclosing it. "Breathe," Rovan said, not a command. A memory of being 12 and stuck, where the riverbank gave way, and he had said it then too. Let him talk. We answer once, we answer right. They did not gather in the yard as if the court had called a fair. They climbed the hill to the stones, and waited until the witch's voice slipped through the grass and made the granite ring. Packs from farther fields came at a jog, shaking rain from hair. 2 human traders clambered after them, greedy for a story. Even 3 of the river folk came, the kind who smelled like clay and refused shoes. They sat on the damp slope and looked like patients. The conclave answered the witch's summons the way old bones answer weather. Rovan felt it in the scars across his knuckles. Iron in the air, fine as dust. The mirrors followed them up the hill like pewter dogs. Callias's face faded and returned, always at the corner of sight, like a fly you could not catch. The stones did not care for mirrors. Their surfaces blurred in black glass, and the reflections showed not a king's lovely mouth but shards of sky, and the tired eyes of men who had not slept. The witch set both bare hands against the central stone. "By river, by hearth, by bread broken, the moot is called," she said. "Let truth stand up where lies are heavy." Callias's voice slid over the slope like oil. "The truth is simple," he said. "She is bound, she is unwell. I will forgive the wolves who feared what they did not understand. Bring her down. There is no need to make this uglier than it is." Rovan had thought he would have to fight to keep his tone steady. He discovered steadiness was a kind of fury with its teeth hidden. "You're not invited to forgive us," he said. "We didn't ask." An elder vampire stepped from one of the mirrors, not a man in the flesh, but an image given weight by belief. He wore a judge's collar, and a pin shaped like a moth. "Alpha Theron," he said. "It is the position of the court that your hearth-witch's theatrics do not unmake a bond recognized under the covenant. Produce the consort. We'll ease this, and restore order." Lysandra walked into the circle before anyone could tell her not to. "You will not touch me," she said. There it was, the tremor, the little shake at the edges of a voice that had spent too long obeying. The hill heard the tremor, and did not care. The hill cared that the words were spoken where it could swallow and keep them. "You will not name me unwell to have me carried like luggage and hung behind a door until guests leave. You will not turn my worst moments into a puppet show." The vampire judge smiled his pity smile. "The lady is distressed," he said to the crowd. "We understand. We all want what is best for her." Lysandra took something from her coat, a packet wrapped in oiled linen, and tied with pack twine. "I kept this because he made me doubt," she said, and her fingers, which had torn gold and swung chain, shook at last. "He told me I imagined wrong. He told me I fell downstairs I never climbed. He told me I was sick when I was lonely. And lonely, when I was sick, and wrong, when I was right. So I wrote and hid, and asked old women in the human quarter to sign their names, when they sold me comfrey and arnica. I wrote dates next to bruises I hid so well even I could forget." She laid the packet on the stone and untied it. Pages slid out, ink dim from sweat and time, edges wrinkled, pressed flowers flaking, a faint scent of willow. The witch touched the topmost sheet and made no words. She did not need to. The stone under them hummed once, low as thunder far away. The judge's smile thinned. "Anyone can write anything," he said lightly. "This is hardly." A second bundle thumped onto the stone. Kale, mud on his knees and rain in his beard, grinned like a man who had picked a lock he was told had no key. "Under the old hearth," he said. "Just where a girl who was not allowed to be real would hide her proof for when she needed to be. The house told us because houses hate lies." Rovan's eyes found Lysandra's and stayed. He did not speak. She did. "Read," she told the judge. He did not take the page, a king's man to the end, refusing to touch a thing that might change him. The witch did it for him. Her old voice took young words and made them sound the way they had when Lysandra had written them by candle in a room that was kept too cold. Midwinter, the witch read, "My wrist is purple where he caught it because I looked at the window too long. He said my staring makes the glass forget who it belongs to. He kissed me after and said he had to teach me carefulness. I wrote the word careful until the candle drowned." Someone on the hill made a sound like a fox when the trap closes on a back foot. The judge flicked his hand in annoyance. "Private grief is not public law. The bond does not exist," the witch said without moving her mouth, which is how you heard witches when they were done being polite. She consented to end it. "The river took it. The stones heard it. Your papers are songs you sing to your own mirror. We've fed our children on less than that. We do not fear you." Callias himself appeared then, because you do not put a house fire out with a pretty servant when the street is watching. He stepped through the black glass as a man might step through a curtain in his own stage hall, and the hill was not impressed. He was terrible the way winter is, beautiful and clean, and the death of small, warm things if you leave them out. "Lysandra," he said. And he did love the way men love objects they polish every day, until they shine so bright they forget they were wood to begin with. "Come, little moon, you're tired. They have made you say ugly things." She knew that voice like hunger. Her bones remembered bending when it came into a room. She felt it reach for her like hands that had memorized the exact weight of her compliance. She held Rovan in the corner of her eye, like the line you keep to the shore when you swim far. He didn't move. He didn't speak for her. He simply existed in her sight, and she was not alone in her own head. "No," she said. The mirrors quivered. Declining a king's favorite word had weight. Callias tipped his head, curiosity turning his mouth. "You think this wolf will keep you?" he asked lightly, as storytellers ask children harmless questions before the boogeyman. "Until he doesn't? Until his pack costs more than your face? They always choose themselves in the end. That's what men do. I, at least, am a god about it." Rovan stepped once closer, not blocking, not covering. "I am a man," he said, "and I am choosing her in front of the stones, the river, and the part of me that would prefer an easier life." He looked not at Callias but at the hill full of people whose mouths were learning new shapes. "Hear me and remember me if I get small later. I choose her. When the court freezes the road and the prices double and our cousin takes your gold to tell you where our grain is kept, I choose her again. When my own council tells me I am a fool, and the younger ones ask why they must keep watch at midnight because of a girl who is not even wolf, I choose her. When she tells me I am wrong and I want the last word, I choose her then as well. And when I am old and my hands don't open jars without help and she is still the girl who climbs willows, I will choose her, and the gate that sticks, and the stupid fence that is a terrible color." It made the hill laugh, ragged and honest, because they could see it. The fence, the old hands, the stupid color. It made Lysandra's throat close, because the future he had just drawn was a spell better than mirrors. Callias's eyes cooled. "Pretty," the king said. "A fable. I prefer law." "Then hear law," the witch said. "The covenant pretends to be older than the river. It is not. No writing with ink outranks what was written in food and shelter, and help given to a woman at your door while you were counting your wines. You call me half-witch like it's an insult. I am the law that kept you alive while you learned to be pretty. You have no place here." He would have reached. He wanted to. You could see the itch in his beautiful hands to take the chin he had long ago learned to tilt just so. The mirrors hummed with his wanting. The stones did not care what he wanted. They cared what was said and seen. "Show them," Rovan murmured, so low that only the space between their shoulders heard. Lysandra lifted her chin and met the mirrors. "You filmed me when I broke," she said. "You set the room too cold, and took my shawl away and told me I was loved if I wore the dress that scratched my ribs, and when I cried you told the mirror I wanted attention, and when I smiled you put your mouth on my acting. You always said I would be nothing without you. Watch." She put her palm flat on the stone. "It was not witchcraft, and it was. It was the courage to let other people see you when you are not beautiful." The witch's hand covered hers. The river lifted its face to the hill, and the mirrors caught an image they did not choose. It was not one of the court's clips. It was a winter morning in the Vale house. Pale light, frost on the panes. Callias's voice asked if she had taken her powder, and Lysandra's voice said yes, when the truth was no, because she had wanted to feel her own feelings for an hour, even if they hurt. He had smiled and kissed her forehead and said, "Good girl." And then later when she tried to speak, the scene shifted and she was telling a seamstress quietly that the bodice bit and the seamstress was saying she would let it out, and Callias was saying no. Pain looks like discipline at court. Then another. Her hand on a cold doorknob that would not turn because a key was not hanging on its hook anymore, and a mirror watching her face as she discovered that, and the mirror catching tears not because it cared, but because it loved to have something to look at. The hill watched. The court's judge watched. The king watched himself watching and did not flinch because he had trained his face not to know itself. When the images ended, the only sound was a raven deciding to leave a branch, because the silence made it nervous. Elder Verin cleared his throat. It sounded like two stones being rolled together into a wall. "That's enough law for me," he said. "If the court wants to argue, they can do it with their boots in the mud." The judge opened his mouth. Before the first word, 3 other voices rose on the hill. Women, not witches, mothers of lanky boys and girls with scraped knees. "We saw her in the market," one called. "She smiled at my baby and remembered she was a person. She bought bread with her own coin," another added. "She did not ask any man for permission. She stopped when my boy tripped," the third said, voice shaking because she had nearly watched him knock his teeth out on the step. "She is not mad. She is tired and polite, and learning how to stand where no one holds her by the chin." Callias's mouth curved, not in joy. "We are done," he said to the mirrors, and some of them dimmed, because power obeyed him. The largest did not. The hearthwitch had wet the stone with her palms' sweat, and the river had gotten into the spell. "No," she said. "We are not." She turned to Rovan. "You said you'd choose her when grain was dear. Mean it now." He had already started to. "We break the storehouses into smaller ones," he said to Kale, mind moving like it did over a field at dusk. "We send half to the hamlets where the king's pretty men forget to go. We trade meat for winter wood before he freezes the road. We send Tavi's cousin to the human quarter for salt because the court always overlooks salt. We ask the river folk to ferry at night. We pay them fair. And law." Elder Verin asked. "We make it sing." Rovan lifted his face to the hill. "By stones and river, and the mouths of those who saw," he said. "We declare that a mate is a vow both hands hold. When one hand opens because the other holds too tight, the vow ends. We declare no wolf will be pressed to return a woman to any house where the window is a mirror, not a view. We declare the court's mirrors liars, when they do not show doors. We invite any who want to argue to bring boots and bread." It wasn't poetry, it wasn't perfect. It was something wolves could remember in the dark. The witch nodded once. The stones hummed as if a jar on a shelf settled, because the house had stopped shaking. Callias looked at Lysandra a final time. There was something like sorrow there if you believed in wolves learning to write good laws without kings telling them how. "You will regret dirt," he said, and stepped backward into the glass. "Maybe," she said to the afterimage, "but I will not regret myself." By dusk the mirrors were gone from the road. By nightfall, the king had sent winter down the mountain anyway, a breath so cold it broke puddles into knives. The wolves dragged blankets from trunks, and set kettles on iron hooks, and moved sacks of grain to low rooms. The Pax Council met, and it was not a council so much as the dividing of work among people who already knew one another's weaknesses. There was no talk of giving her back. That argument had burned up on the hill like fog in a strong noon. Not everyone agreed with Grace. Tommy of the Millbooks, the one who always minded coin better than feelings, cornered Rovan near the stairs with ink on his fingers and fear in his mouth. "He'll strangle us slow," Tommy said. "You've wagered the whole winter on a girl." "I've wagered it on who we are," Rovan said quietly. "If it's wrong, I'll carry it." "You'll not. You can't carry a pack alone." "I won't have to," Kale said from the shadow, because he was always where you didn't think to look. "Go fix the accounts, Tommy. You're braver at numbers than you let on." Lysandra found the art room in the old corner where its window saw the rivers slow back. It wasn't an art room yet. It was a storage space with a table and a wall that wanted to be a surface for other people's seeing. She found a bit of charcoal in a drawer with old hooks and bits of twine. Her hand shook when she set the first line and then steadied. She drew the willow, not as it had been in the Vale house, but as it would be when she planted a cutting by the stupid fence. She drew a gate with a hinge that would stick when it rained, and Rovan's hand bracing the post while he swore in a way that made children laugh, and old women shake their heads and smile when he walked away. She drew the fence a color her mind had not chosen yet. She drew the river as a line that did not end, even when men said it did. He found her there with charcoal on her fingers and a smear on her cheek where she had swiped sweat and made a mark on herself. He leaned in the doorway as if he had always planned to rest against that particular frame. He didn't speak. She didn't either. They let the quiet sit and not be a weapon. At last she said, "I don't know how to end something that didn't start with my yes." "You did," he said, "on a hill, in front of a stone that keeps what it hears." "That was for the world," she said. She brushed the charcoal on the table, making a crescent of dark under her nail. "I keep thinking I will wake in the cold room with powder on my tongue, and the mirror watching." "You can wake here," he said, "with nettle soap and terrible coffee. The mirror is a window unless we need to check if there is stew on our face." She laughed then and put her fist to her mouth to keep it from turning into something else. He crossed the room and did not touch her until she nodded once, a small movement that the body makes when it remembers it is allowed to ask. He set his hands on her shoulders, warm and heavy as the coat had been, and leaned his forehead to hers, wolf to wolf, except she was not, except somehow she was. "We should sleep," he said, voice lower because night was climbing. "Tomorrow we make the law heavy enough to sit on a table and not slide off when someone bumps it." "And if he comes before dawn?" she asked, to the space between their breaths. "Then I'll meet him in the yard," Rovan said. "And I'll say no, again, until the word wears a groove into the ground and the river runs in it." "And if the pack tires?" "We'll tell them stories," he said, mouth curving. "About a fence, an awful color, and a gate that sticks and bread burned and eaten anyway. About a winter we lived because we refused to be less than ourselves. The storm outside shifted and the mill breathed the way old buildings do when they are relieved of a bad weight. The witch's steps creaked down the hall. Kale barked a laugh at something Tavi had said. Somewhere below them a kettle began to sing. In the night, mirrors tend to creep back if you let them. The window caught only the wet, honest dark. They did sleep, finally, when words had said all they could say for one day. In the hour before dawn, when men who mean harm choose their work and men who mean better boil water, the first of the king's winter tricks stepped daintily onto the road. Ice like glass over the mill race, a glitter along the eaves, a sheet on the step that could put a neck to the wrong angle if a body ran. Rovan woke to the smell of cold, and stood with his hand flat to the window pane. He could feel it through the lead, malice wearing beauty like a velvet cloak. He smiled, not kindly. "Pretty," he told the morning. "We've got salt." On the hill, the stones held the day's words. In the river, the gold bracelet lay under weed and silt, catching a slice of moon only when water moved just so, a bound thing made harmless, a circle broken because two hands had decided to open. Part 3. The Breaking of Winter *. The storm had teeth now. Snow fell sideways, winds screeching across the valley as if the mountain itself disapproved of the choice made at the stones. The sky was a bruise, swollen and purple, lightless even at noon. By dawn, Rovan's wolves had salted the steps, braced the doors, and hung iron charms over the windows. They knew the king would not fight with swords first. He would use the weather. Vampires loved control, and Callias was no exception. He had turned storms into sermons long before Rovan had learned to shift. Still, even Calaxia's storms obeyed nature in the end. Snow melted, rivers rose, and spring always came, if something still lived to see it. Inside the mill, the hearth burned blue-white, flames made strange by the witch's whispered wards. The pack's council had gathered again, their coats steaming, their boots ringed with thaw. Rovan stood at the long table, the same one Lysandra had swung a chain upon, now crowded with parchment and half-empty mugs. "We've held 2 days," Kale said. "Roads blocked north, but the young ones keep finding ways through the woods. We're getting food in. Barely." "Barely is enough," Rovan said. "Not if he keeps freezing the river," Tavi added. "We've got boats stuck under ice, 3 hulls cracked. He means to starve us quiet." "He won't," Lysandra said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. She stood near the fire, wrapped in a grey shawl that made her look more human than vampire. Callias doesn't understand hunger. He never ate without applause. Rovan glanced at her, half amusement, half heartbreak. And you did? I used to eat bread on the windowsill with Maria, when she could sneak it to me, she said softly. It tasted better than all the silver platters in his court. The witch chuckled from her chair in the corner. Then feed them the same way, wolf boy. Make the whole valley your window. It wasn't just metaphor, they started baking that night. Every able hand was put to the ovens. Mothers brought flour. Hunters brought root and game. Lysandra, who had never cooked anything but had watched hunger too long, stood beside the oldest baker, and learnt to knead dough with fingers that had once only known ink and blood. By dawn, the scent of bread drifted across the frozen road and into the trees. Wolves carried baskets to the human villages, to the outpost by the iron bridge, to every hamlet that might have bent under the court's gold. Hunger did what politics never could. It made strangers loyal. The witch smiled into her cup of mead. See, that's law, child. The kind you can eat. Rovan didn't smile back. His eyes were on the window. Law or not, the king will come. He can't stand being defied twice. The king came with silence first. It arrived in the night, a hum that drained color from the air. Horses whickered uneasily. Candles bent sideways without wind. When Lysandra woke, the glass of her window had gone black, not with ice this time but with reflection. She saw him before he spoke. His image hung in the pane, perfect and pale, framed by nothing but her own trembling. Lysandra, said the reflection of the king. His voice was honey and venom. Come back. The wolves will turn on you once they're cold enough. They always do. You think love protects you. Love fades faster than blood cools. She rose, pulling the shawl tighter. Then perhaps I'll fade with it. At least I'll fade free. He smiled, a thin thing. Do you truly think that wolf can keep you safe from me? You were made for eternity, not to rot beside a hearth. She walked to the window and laid her palm against the glass. The reflection didn't mimic her. It stayed still, expression soft and cruel all at once. You made eternity feel like a cage, she said. He made an hour feel like a world. The reflection cracked. Not from her touch, not from the cold, but from rage. Tiny fractures spidered through the glass, a scream of light twisting between worlds. She stumbled back as the mirror shattered outward, shards flaring into air that burned cold enough to sear skin. Rovan burst through the door before she hit the floor. His bare feet left wet prints on the wood. He hadn't even bothered with boots. He swept her against him, cloak wrapping her in heat and heartbeat. You saw him, he said. He saw me, she whispered. He's coming. The witch appeared in the doorway behind him, braid unraveling, eyes bright, with something older than fear. Then we finish it, she said. No more mirrors, no more storms. The king wants obedience. Give him reckoning. By dawn, the pack had gathered on the frozen river. The witch stood at the center, her staff planted in ice that groaned but didn't break. Lysandra stood beside her, hair loose, eyes shadowed with sleeplessness and resolve. Rovan flanked them, his men forming a half-circle behind him, cloaks snapping in the wind. The king arrived with no fanfare. He didn't need one. His presence was enough to bend the world. Shadows bent toward him as if drawn by gravity. His coat was black, his crown a thin circlet of frost that glimmered like captured starlight. Callias of the eternal line, the witch called, voice echoing. The river demands settlement. Callias looked at Lysandra, not the witch. You speak of rivers, of laws written in mud. You forget who I am. I remember exactly who you are, she said, stepping forward. Her shawl fell from her shoulders, caught by wind and flung into the current. A man who mistook ownership for love. He smiled faintly, then turned his gaze to Rovan. And you, the mongrel alpha. Do you imagine this ends with both of you breathing? Rovan's answer was quiet. No. But it ends with her free. The king laughed, a sound that cracked the ice. Then you die first." He moved faster than thought. One instant he was standing, the next his hand was buried in Rovan's chest, except it wasn't. The wolf had shifted mid-breath, fur bursting like flame, teeth bared in a snarl that froze even the wind. Callias staggered back as claws raked across his arm, spilling silver blood that hissed on contact with the ice. The pack surged forward, but the witch raised her staff. "No! Let the law fight its own." Lysandra's heart hammered. She reached for the river without knowing how, just knowing that every drop of it carried the gold she had thrown away. Her wrist burned, faint lines glowing where the King's Mark once lived. The river answered. Water cracked upward through the ice in a roaring column, cold and alive. It wrapped around her, lifting her onto the frozen surface like a spirit born of flood and fury. By the vow broken, by the blood spilled unwilling, by the chains dissolved, she cried, "I name the bond ended." The water flared white-blue, swallowing the reflection of the king's crown whole. He screamed, not from pain but from disbelief. His image began to split. Face, form, shadow, each pulling in a different direction, unable to stay whole without her tether. Rovan, still in wolf form, lunged once more, and tore through the illusion. The king's body dissolved into mist, his voice echoing one last time through the valley. "You can't kill what's eternal." "No," the witch said softly. "But you can unmake what never learned to love." The river fell silent. Then, slowly, the ice began to thaw beneath their feet. The storm's howl faded into rain, soft and clean, washing the valley of its darkness. By spring the valley bloomed again. The mill became home, not hideout. The wolves rebuilt, the river unfroze, and trade returned under new laws written not in parchment but in practice. Lysandra planted a willow by the fence. It was small, just a green thread in the soil, but she smiled at it, as if it were already tall enough to shade them both. Rovan came up behind her, wiping sawdust from his hands. "The fence is that color again," he said, pretending horror. "It's perfect," she said. "It's terrible." "Then don't look at it. I'll look at you instead." She turned, smiling without hesitation for the first time in years. "You always do." He leaned against the post, watching her fingers press earth around the sapling. "The pack will tell this story wrong someday," he said. "They'll say I fought the king for you. Didn't you?" "No. I fought him because no one should have to ask for their own freedom twice." The wind stirred, soft, carrying the smell of wet bark and new grass. She stood, and brushed dirt from her palms. "Do you think he's gone?" she asked quietly. Rovan looked toward the river. "I think the world's big enough for ghosts," he said, "but not big enough to scare you anymore." She took his hand. "Then let's fill it with better things." He nodded, and together, they walked back toward the mill, their gate creaking, their fence shining that ridiculous color. Behind them, the willow leaned toward the light. "What do you think, listener? Would you have run from eternity for a single hour of truth? Would you have chosen love that might die over a bond that would never let go? In the end, maybe the question isn't about immortality at all, but about freedom, and whether you'd have the courage to claim it. Because sometimes love isn't about forever. It's about finally belonging to yourself.